Hi, podcast listeners. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. We have so many guests on this show making a difference in our lives, making a difference all around the world with the expertise that they bring. And yet so many of you are reaching out to me saying, you want more. It's not enough just what we're putting on these podcast episodes for you. And so I am here to extend a very warm welcome to you to our Difference Maker community, where you can join for as little as $5 a month to get all this extra content. Out the gate, you're going to get 30 plus minisodes of exclusive content not available for the regular podcast listeners, and an exclusive minisode every month. And you'll get exclusive voting power to help us pick podcast topics and more. And that's at our Changers tier. There's 3 different main tiers and then an extra larger tier. But whatever tier that you join at, you will be included in this extra content. And I know that many of you are wanting to go a little bit deeper. And so even though it gets a little wild in there sometimes because of how deep we go, I want you to join us there. This extra content is very special. It means a great deal to me to be a part of this community with you. And I would love to just exchange ideas or perspectives that you have around these different episodes. And that's the place where we do it. So please show up to our Difference Maker community. Give us $5 out of your pocket every month. And I think that you'll have a lot of fun in there because we do. And I would love for you to join us. So go to patreon.com/A World of Difference to join us there. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Welcome, everyone, again to the Change series that we're in. And change means all the things that it means. It means the good. It means the bad. It means the I don't want to talk about it. It means I hope this is over soon. And oh, yay, there's change on the horizon. For me this week, an exciting change is that I've started a new job here in Silicon Valley, and I'm really excited about this change. It's a welcome change, something I've been wanting for a while, and it's all the doors opened in the right direction. And I'm excited about the team that I'm joining, but it brings a lot of changes. Today, we have dug into the archives to bring back a guest that we had, and she is all about change in the deepest ways, as many third culture kids are. Doni Aldine identifies as a third culture kid, a TCK, because of her experiences growing up in multiple cultures, and also is really one of the people who's helped so many understand what it means to be a third culture kid and third culture adult through her academic research, her speaking, and her writing. Doni Aldine is an amazing woman, just all by her own right. She's been recognized by Folio as a top woman in media honoree. She's a globally mobile Afro Latina and first generation North American who by age 19 had lived in and identified with 7 cultures on 5 continents. She's passionate about creating community for cross-cultural populations. She's the editor and founder of Cultures magazine, which I highly recommend you check out. She has consulted with Warner Brothers, done marketing for global corporations, presented around the globe as keynote at conferences, universities, and in the media, and developed a university curricula for global cultural identity, and founded Cultures Global Multicultural Lifestyle Network. And it's kind of incredible when you see the amount of change she has brought and the amount of difference she's making in the world and the amount of just difference that is embodied within her. So in this Black History Month, I know there's a lot of nuance around Black history and a lot of conversations in the DEI space where you'll see posters in your office or workplace probably of Dr. King. And Doni just brings a very nuanced conversation around the beautiful aspects of Black history. So welcome to the show again, Doni Aldine. Hello, Doni. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast.
Hello, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm thrilled that we got to meet. We have so much in common. Who knew? It's amazing.
I know,
And
right?
for all the audience listening around the world that you're meeting Doni for the first time, you're in for a treat. But I'll let you just introduce yourself. I will not ask you where you're from because as a TCK, I know we don't know how to answer that question. But tell us about your background and what you currently do.
Okay, so my background. I'm Trinidadian Costa Rican. My father is from Costa Rica. My mother is from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm very proud of that. Proud of being Afro Latin. And I was born in New York City, and at 2 weeks old, I started my international travels. So I moved to Trinidad. It was my first accent, first of many. And sometimes they all come out at once. I'm sure you know what that's all about. Um, and from there, I moved to 7 different cultures, or 6 additional different, or no, 5 additional, because they already have the US, then Trinidad, 5 additional cultures on, I say 5 continents, but they don't really count Central America as a continent, but I like to count it.
Totally. It's very different. Yeah.
So, yeah, I grew up that way, and I love it. It's a big part of who I am. I focus on, I'm editor-in-chief of Cultures magazine, which celebrates 21st century cultural diversity. That includes TCKs, immigrants, mixed race people, people who have a foot in 2 or more worlds. So it's all about how we grew up and how we see the world, lifestyle content that would appeal to us. And with that, I teach. I'm a TCK scholar, or a third culture kid. I'm sure. I mean, I usually explain it, but I think for your audience, I do not have to.
No, yeah.
So I'm a TCK scholar and have been for almost 20 years now. I speak around the globe on this. And so I teach at Colorado State University a class for cultures that's called Media and Global Culture Identity. So I try to explain to people what it's like to be a TCK. Man, let me tell you, it's hard to get these monoculturals to understand.
Oh, I know. We're all feeling your pain. We know
Oh gosh, it's something, I'll tell you. Sometimes this sounds terrible. I'm like, they never seem to amaze me, but what never seems to amaze me, I was just reading papers last night, and I was like, wow, that's a new angle that I never considered. Like, the way the information comes at someone who's monocultural, it's really hard for them to decipher and um, assimilate the information and really understand it. So I work hard to try to get them to break their lenses a little bit and think outside of themselves, which is not an easy task, right? It's difficult, and it's painful for them, because whenever you're learning something that different and that new. I remember when I was working on my PhD, the I could feel the grooves being carved into my brain as you learn new things. Like, it's true physical pain, right? And I feel their pain sometimes. I could see that they're trying and they don't get it and they don't understand why, and sometimes it's difficult to explain. So that's what I do. Cultures is in digitally in 208 countries and territories, and in print in it was almost 2,000 stores. I'd say, I'm just gonna say, well, just many hundreds of stores. I don't know how many right now. And so we might be switching to an online membership model, which I'm really excited about, because then we can reach more of our audience rather than just educate the populace. So that's what I do.
So cool. I love it. You're living the TCK dream in a lot of ways. So
All
it's
right.
great. I know. Like, you just fully and professionally have every reason to talk about it. And you're describing how it's hard sometimes to help monoculturals understand. And I think every TCK listening has had a moment, and probably multiple moments of that. And so to hear you as a TCK scholar, talk about it in that way, it's really, really helpful. I know for me, but maybe you could help us have a few more tools, because I know there are probably people listening. Maybe it's their parents that are monocultural that they're trying to address, or their grandparents, or just colleagues at work, or maybe they're, working in a nonprofit space, and they're trying to help people see what they just naturally see. And when you naturally do something, it can be very hard to explain how to do it, because it's just like the air you breathe. So
Yeah.
maybe what are some tools that you found helpful in that way?
Oh man, 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 that is a big question. There's so many things, and it's interesting. It's harder, I think, when it's someone close to us that doesn't really understand.
Mm,
I'll share a quick anecdote with you. Quick story. My mom, both of my parents actually are different dimensions of TCKness. So I focus on dimensionality.
okay.
It's something that I realized about being a TCK, because everyone's TCKness is very different,
Yep.
right? But when I looked at my family, and you have 3 TCK children, when you look at your family, and especially if they were each born in a different place, it is amazing to see the differences in who each person is, right? So I know for me, when I first started cultures, we had a barbecue, and we invited all these cross-cultural people, different dimensions of cross-culturality, like someone who was a TCA or a third culture adult, someone who's an immigrant, someone who is an educational TCK. All different people came together. Let me tell you, we all had a blast.
Of course.
It was supposed to be right. It was fantastic. That was 8 years ago. I still remember. It was
Aw.
supposed to be 2 hours from noon to 2. We were there until midnight, right?
Wow.
And telling all these stories, and it's so funny, the familiarity of all the stories. Well, so my brother starts talking, my older brother, and he's talking about being a military brat. And I'm looking at him like, are you crazy? Like, what are you talking about? Who are you? And as he spoke, he's only 2.5 years older than I am. But as he spoke, I realized that is his TCK experience. That's not my TCK experience. I did have a few years of military bratness, but most of my TCK experience is global nomad TCK experience, right? And educational TCK experience. And that's, a lot of people who come from foreign families can understand that. You get sent away to school, you get sent to live with family, different things like that. So even though we grew up a lot together, we also grew up a lot apart, right? And at that moment, I realized how different he was. Flash forward a few years, then I'm looking at both of my parents, and out of the blue, I realized they're both TCKs, right? Different dimensions. And just like my brother has a different dimension to me, and I have twin younger brothers, they have a completely different dimension. They're almost completely American because
Wow.
their dimensionality is so small. But it really informed to me how we communicate as a family and how we understand things or don't understand things or don't understand each other, right? I knew that my little brothers really couldn't relate to my mom in the way that my older brother and I could, but this really gave more information. So what kind of tool does that give you? Wow. I think the biggest tool in our tool bag is something that we're good at, but we need to focus on more so that we could use it to our advantage. And that would be empathy. Okay.
Mm.
So being very open, one thing I find, and I found this to myself, and I have to work on it every day. I had to change it for myself, is we are so multicultural, right? We do all the things, we've been all the places, we think we got it, right? But there's so much to learn. The world is so vast. There's so many cultures. And even when you look at TCKness, there's so many mixtures and layers. So no, we don't get it, right? We get it better than most people, but no one gets it 100%, right?
Mm.
We're
Yeah.
really good at it. And to be excellent at it, we have to remember that nobody gets it. So to have that empathy and always keep your mind open and not think you know it, that is one of the best tools that you can have. And then use that to try to relate to the person who's monocultural that doesn't get what you're saying, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so good. That's so true. And I know everybody listening that's a TCK can resonate with this because it is a bit of the superpower that you get.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you have had to learn how to observe and learn a culture by watching what people do, really getting into their ways of talking, not just the language, but the intonations and not just what the words mean, but how they use them and what that how you would phrase that kind of thing. Like there's so much observation required to to fit in or assimilate or whatever it is you're trying to do as a TCK, and it's just these skills we pick up along the way. But you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody is so unique, and we all instinctively know this, and we use those superpowers to do that. Wow, my husband and I, we have a lot of Afghan refugees arriving here in Northern California, and we just went early on when some of them are arriving, and just they were in a hotel, and we were doing these needs assessments, and it was like I don't know anything about Afghan culture. I mean, I've lived in Asia and South America, and I've picked up a few languages here and there, but I don't know other than what I've read in the news and people I've talked to that have lived in Afghanistan. But we just sat there and have an Afghan friend that we had made who could speak English. He used to be a translator for the U.S. military, and he was kind of the liaison with this family with us. And they just put out a bunch of pistachios on these cute little trays, and then the 13-year-old daughter started pouring us tea, and we're like, do we wait for 3 times them to offer it and then drink it, or do we drink it right away? So we're just kind of watching him, like, what does he do, right? And we
Right.
were paying attention to all the cues and just like following what he did. And then they offered us a second round of tea first, and we're like, okay, sure. And they poured tea in our cups, and then he put his hand over his teacup and was like, no, thank you. And we were like, uh-oh, like maybe we were supposed to do that. And he goes, this is our culture. We refuse the second cup. And we're like, okay, well, remember that next time.
Oh,
I know. He's like, it's
really?
not a huge thing, but he's, it's just one of those like, yeah, we'll do that next time. But
You know,
we learn through doing.
yes.
That's kind of like how we learn. Yeah.
I love that example. Here is why. I preach this all the time. And I say it in a not very eloquent way, but so I like to say it like this. I'm like, you have to have the courage to put your foot in it,
Yep.
right? Like you just, when I talk to people about diversity, so in the United States, diversity really means race and or racial diversity. And well, it's more to it than that, but you know what I mean? When people talk about multiculturalism, they're really talking about racial diversity. And so when people ask, how do I learn? What do I do differently? And I'm like, you have to have the courage to put your foot in it. And that's what that was, right? Like, we don't know what we're doing, but you have to get out there and try to experience it. And you're going to make faux pas along the
Yep.
way. And then you just have to understand, accept some of them are bigger than others, right? Like you
Right.
said, that's not a big deal. So that was a little one, but I've done some big ones,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And
Oh, we
you're
all
like,
have.
okay, sorry.
Right.
And then, with humility, accept what's happened, absorb it, learn from it, and move forward, right? I feel like that is the problem with um, multicultural education in the United States. Like people are so obsessed with trying to say the right thing and do the right thing that they're not willing to put themselves out there. But you have to be vulnerable. You have to put yourself out there and have courage and then develop that empathy in order to learn. And
Yeah.
so the pain of the learning, just like I said, the grooves in your brain when you're learning something new, there's also physical pain when I did that wrong. I didn't really mean to hurt that person's feelings or whatever.
Right.
That hurts. And
Mm.
you have to sit there and let it absorb so that you can grow from that and learn and do it differently next time. Yeah, I
That's
love that
good. That's
story.
good. I'm going to use that. You got to put yourself out there. You got to put your foot out there. That's really good. Because I think there is an element of courage that TCKs probably naturally develop because it's
Mhm.
just, we've seen it happen, like our parents moved us to that country and there was a level of courage within that. And I think for immigrant families and refugees or whatever your story is, you kind of had that experience. It's so normal to have that kind of courage. You just see it all around you. So you just naturally do it.
Just do
Yeah.
it.
You
Yeah.
just do it.
And there's a time too, I think that you have to decide to do it because as you get older, you don't have to be that person anymore, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially if you then live in monoculture situations, you don't have to be that person anymore. But I choose to continually every day put
Mm.
my foot out there. And it's scary. But it's how you grow. It's how you stay young.
That's right. For
It's
sure.
elixir.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, that's the thing that makes us human, right? We need connection. And I
Yeah.
think that whether you speak the language with someone or not, you can find human connection even going cold turkey into a place that you have no skills, right? Just because if you have that courage and you understand human connection, then, that's what we're going for and that's what draws us together. I know you've done a lot of writing and work around how to create community for cross-cultural populations.
Mhm.
Yeah, what's some of your advice or what's some of the learnings that you have around that you could share with us?
That is such a great question. And the reason, the audience can't see, but I have this huge smile on my face right now because on LinkedIn just today, this weekend, so I've been doing this work for a long time. I've been trying to push this ball up the hill for a long time. It's so funny because interestingly enough, in the last 2 years, I've seen a huge shift in how many people know what TCK is, how many people are doing things like your podcast, how many people are out there. So that gives me hope, right? But I've been doing it for a long time. So this weekend was one of those days, though, that I was like, is anyone listening? Does this make any difference? Right. And someone on LinkedIn, a TCK that didn't know he was a TCK until I met him on Clubhouse. I think he's out of Vietnam. He's a MD, MPH, right? Great guy that I met. And so we're connected on LinkedIn. And he reposted this comment where someone was speaking about a Romanian Chinese tennis player who was reared partially in Canada, born and reared in Canada, and trained in the UK. And so this post was from a monoculture person, I'm assuming, the way it was written. And they walked through and talked about the different parts and how those different parts made the whole and how great that was, and that we need to celebrate all of that, because they were talking about how, well, Canada embraces her because she's their hero, and China embraces her, she's their hero, and Romania embraces her, she's their hero. Her dad's Romanian, her mom's Chinese. And so I was like, when I saw that post, it lifted my spirits, and I said, okay, I can go another day, right? And I reposted it. Someone today made a comment. Yes, I agree with most of this, which the gist of it was, hey, we need to embrace all of who she is. And this person said, well, we have to be careful that we don't take away her belonging. That's her choice. We can't assume who she is. And I haven't answered it yet, but my answer is going to be, as someone who grew up very similarly, that's what it's all about. It's about belonging. So you're looking through your lens of one nation. So what assumptions are you making? Are you assuming that she wants to choose one or another? This person didn't make any assumption. They just celebrated all of who she is. She still gets to choose who that is, right? Just like Naomi Osaka, same thing. People often assume that she's going to just be Japanese because that is her passport country. However, she always embraces all of who she is, which is Haitian, Japanese. I don't know if she embraces the US as well also, but anyway, we get to choose. To choose. And so I hope that answers your question. I know I'm a storyteller. Can you tell? I tell long stories.
Oh, we love it. That's what people want to hear. And you've got fascinating stories. And what's so crazy is I saw that exact post on LinkedIn and I reacted. I didn't have somebody make the comment there, but I think that when somebody like TCKs read that, we're like, how cool. She has so many fun cultures. Mm-hmm. And it never crosses my mind that she would want to choose just one. Yes. And I've had you may have encountered this too, like monocultural adults in particular in my life or around me as I've been raising my children will often feel sad on my behalf or my husband's behalf or my children's behalf that we don't have an identity tied to one country. And they're always like, how are you going to help your kids walk through that? And I'm like, we love it. What are you talking? There's not an issue. Like, we don't need our identity to be rooted in one country. Yes. We actually love the fact, for the most part, people I've met, I'm sure there's exceptions. Most TCKs I know love that our identity does not come from one place. Our identity comes from all the places and all the peoples and all the foods and all the cultures, and we really like that. And so when I read that post about her, I thought, how fun! What a great mixture of places,
Well, and it's so interesting. Yes, I love the mixtures. Oh my gosh, that's why I love what we do at Cultures, because man, there's always another fascinating story that you're like, are you kidding me? That is your background? Tell me some more. Yeah. When I was in high school, I lived with this family. It's a long story, but we had come from Turkey. My family kept moving on, but I stayed in the same place, and they had me stay with this family. And I remember one day the mom just looked at me with pity and said, oh, she basically was kind of quietly admonishing my mother, like, how could she? How dare she? And I was like, what are you talking about? This is fantastic. My life is fantastic. Now, at the time, I didn't realize, of course, as TCKs, there's challenges that come with all the gifts that we get. Yes. And the unresolved grief is real. That's the thing I think is biggest with TCKs, that, it's wonderful what you're doing for your family and for your kids, because I think your kids will be healthier and more whole than most of us who grew up, let's say, in my generation, right? Yeah. And even though I even look at my brothers and how they accepted our lifestyle, and I moved the most out of all of my siblings, right? And to the most countries, and as a child. And so, well, maybe as an adult too, now that I think about it, but especially after this year of South America that we've done for the magazine, I just told you, I spent 6 months in South America. So it's interesting to see how everybody accepts it differently. But the unresolved grief, I think, is the thing that causes TCKs the most pain over time, because usually research shows that TCKs have a break between a physical, a mental, or emotional break between age 27 and like 45. I always find it fascinating to find out what's happened to people. And I'm like, oh, that was their break. That was their break. I had one. I had a physical break. And who knew, right? It's almost, for me, it was like, okay, you're going along. Life is good. You're very resilient. We're resilient, right? We're
Yep. Mm-hmm.
adaptable for all the things. And I'm like, okay, no big deal. I can get over that next obstacle. And boom, that's the one that hits you. And like your body just shuts down. It was like a lifetime of pain. The one straw went over and said, nope, nope, nope. You have to sit down right now and you have to take care of this. You have to pay attention, right? So anyway, this the woman I lived with, who is a lovely, or the family, but the mom thought it was just horrible that I had this lifestyle. But now she just liked one of my pictures on Facebook, and all the people who are like, I wish I had your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. That's so true. Oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah.
Yes, unresolved grief is something that, my husband and I have been aware of since we were in college, and we heard good TCK consultants, encourage us to do good goodbyes. And we've tried to encourage that with our kids. You can't always do them, but as, trying to mitigate that as much as possible. There's only so much you can control. Sometimes moves happen suddenly and you do your best, but good
Yeah.
goodbyes to people and places and food, keeping little things you can cherish, and knowing they'll always be a part of you. COVID's been hard for a lot of us TCKs because, you're not open to all the borders you'd like to be in and
Right, right,
all
right.
that. And so people had to move sometimes during the COVID time. And I grieved on behalf of those TCKs having to leave suddenly in those situations. That's not easy.
No,
But go
I
ahead.
also feel like PCKs have a lot of tools. Like when COVID first started, of course, we didn't know it was going to go on this long, right? But
Right.
when it first started, I was like, hey, we have the tools to deal with it. I was watching all my monocultural friends like suffering because the sudden change was so difficult, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
many Ks, unfortunately or unfortunately, are so used to that we were able to adapt quickly. Many of us, I'm not going to
Yep.
say everyone,
Right.
but
No, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and especially any TCK who's lived in multiple crises in different countries around the world, which, not everybody has that experience, but a lot do. And so, um, yeah, especially the whole notion of like not being able to be connected to people or see them. We've had to find ways to connect to our people. I mean, fortunately, for my kids, their generation has more technology. I mean, we'd find a way to get a letter, even if it took a month to get there to your friend. Like you wrote aerograms or whatever. You
yes.
stayed connected because you had to.
I think nobody probably knows what an aerogram is anymore. Those were the best though. Oh my
They were.
God.
I know. Totally. Yeah, exactly. Even my husband and I, part of our dating relationship, he was in the Philippines and I was in Indonesia for a whole summer. And it was like every week I'd get an aerogram from like the rural village in the Philippines where he was staying.
Oh,
So,
that's so sweet.
yeah, I should have saved him. I don't know why I didn't. But,
Oh, yes. Even, I was with my husband for a long time. We're divorced now, but I still have all that stuff.
yeah, you do. Good
I
for
was
you.
thinking the other day, what am I going to do with this? Because the man has a new family, but
Yeah,
it's so sweet.
part of your history. Yeah, it's part of your story for sure.
Well, thank you for that. That just helped me.
Yeah, take us back to our aerograms. So I know that in the work that you do a bit around like some of the multicultural media and that sort of thing. And so I was actually we had a couple of friends over last night, a couple of students at Stanford. One's a Singaporean friend of ours, and others a Malaysian. We were talking about the most recent Marvel movie, and also how like so many of the cast from that movie were actually from Crazy Rich Asians, too. And it's like we would just like to see more diversity of even Asian American actors. And then why is it so often when you have an Asian, in a role in a movie or a TV show, so much of it is very cliche and very typical, like their character seems to revolve around the Asianness more than often who they are as a person. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, and because of the space that you're in, and
Yeah.
where you hope to see it go as well.
Well, as a media scholar as well, that's part of how media is developed. If you notice, so I have plenty of Asian friends, right? I always have, since I can remember. And we would have these discussions. I'm specifically, because I talk with my new friends as well, but I'm specifically talking about when I was younger, like in junior high or high school. And my friends would be like, how come, well, there would be a Black person, I'm phenotypically African appearing. And so people would they would say to me, how come there's always a Black person, there's never an Asian person? Right. And so then when I went to college and studied media, who knew that's like part of the formula, right? It's when, if you remember back, I don't know if you're old enough, but if you can remember back to when the WB in the United States, that TV network formed, and also Fox, um, I can go out on a limb and say I bet you the first shows they had were more African American leaning, right? Because that's kind of the formula. You start with these, and then as they get popular, you expand out to these bigger to the more majority group, and then you turn into this big network, right? Same. I think the same thing is happening culturally with other ethnicities, right? So it started with, in the United States, African Americans. And I distinguish that between Black or African Americans. I consider myself Black because I'm Afro Latin Caribbean. So when people call me African American, I'm like, wait, no, I'm not. And then they go, huh?
Right. What?
I'm like, because it's cultural, right? It's not really racial. And so anyway, that is where the Asian community now is in that cycle of how the characters develop before you become mainstream. If you look, I didn't watch the Emmys last night. I usually watch it. My students usually have an assignment on the Emmys to pull out the global multiculturalism that they see. I didn't do that last night. I saw a couple snippets and I could see that there were things there. And it's interesting because if you look at the Black community and the different things that are celebrated, look how long, I mean, I'm 50, almost 52. Look how long it took in my lifetime of me watching to see that it's still a struggle, right? Yeah. And for the Asian community, the Latin community, they're behind that, right? And I don't know why the Black community was chosen. I mean, that's not part of my educational focus. I should probably talk to one of my colleagues and speak more about that. But to your question, that's what's happening. And first it's the caricatures, and then it's the stereotypes, and then it moves on from there. But it takes quite a while before it's truly mainstream. I was in South America when the new Marvel movie came out. First of all, I don't know about everybody else, but as a TCK, I'm a Marvel freak.
We're all fans.
Right. I'm a superhero freak. So I like DC also, but Marvel is my place, right? So I connect to the characters very much because of, they have these superpowers, which we have.
Yeah.
They're usually out of the ordinary. They usually are struggling to fit in. They have a foot in two worlds. So I really connect with many of their characters. So I always watch everything, but I haven't seen that one yet because I was out of the country. So I'm excited to see it.
Oh, you'll love it. And there's 2 end credit scenes, so stay for the whole thing. Yeah, we have a resident MCU expert in our house. He's all about the history of MCU and loves to trivia question us, and nobody can outshine him with that. So he made sure we stayed in the theater.
We might have to have him do something on Cultures TV, because I've always wanted someone who could, I could do it, but I can't do everything. Like I have enough information, but I've always wanted somebody who could talk through all the Marvel stuff to show like the connectivity with the TCK community. So anyway.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun. I'll try to get him to write a paper or something and send it to you. He'd be like, Mom, I'm just in 8th grade, stop.
We can do it on video. I'm sure he'd love that. I have this picture in my head of how animated and excited he would be.
He would be. He's all about this. It's hysterical. Yeah, you would be like indulging him. Absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I love it. So let's talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion, something I'm super passionate about. I'm sure a lot of TCKs are, but I know that you mentioned earlier a lot about like the empathy side, right, for people. But how would you say that emotional intelligence is key for diversity and inclusion? We have a lot of diversity and inclusion here in like the tech world in Silicon Valley. And I think it is a bit of a surface level at times, but how does the emotional intelligence just take it to that next level?
I was about to say, that's really interesting to hear. You have a lot of that in Silicon Valley, because it doesn't appear to be, but I bet I can imagine what I think what you just said encapsulates it well. It's probably very surface. And I'm loving that people are starting to embrace going more deeply into diversity, inclusion, and belonging, right? There's
Yeah.
also social justice. I feel, I said I've been in this work for so long and I've been pushing this boulder up the hill. And I think one of the things in the United States that's an issue is social justice is still trying to be achieved. We're still trying to achieve justice for populations.
Yeah.
And because of that, that is the focus, right? And so when you come in talking about, what I call 21st century cultural diversity, it feels like a luxury to those people. And of course, again, remember they're looking through their monocultural lens. So even
Right.
someone who's grown up in a disadvantaged, let's say economically disadvantaged area or home, they have certain privileges from my estimation that a TCK or someone who is has a foot in two or more worlds does not have, right?
Yeah.
And so the first time, I didn't know that whenever I talked about this, people immediately would think, oh, well, how lucky you were, you got to travel to all these places. And someone said that to me one day, and literally my jaw was on the floor. This was years ago. And I thought, oh wow. Well, I don't know that any migrants or immigrants, or not any, I shouldn't say any. If you speak to some migrants or immigrants or refugees or even TCKs, I'm not sure that everybody would agree with you that that was a privilege, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a privilege, but the point is, when they say privilege, what they mean is they're looking at the vacation end of it, right? Like, so
Right.
they have their own homogeneous life, living on the same street with, let's say, their grandparents, maybe their family, their friends that they've never left, they went to high school prom, whatever the thing is in their culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're taking that lens and then they're attributing what you do to that lens. So all they see is the travel and you got to do all these things, but they're not thinking what it means to have lost all of these things, right?
Right.
And so whether there was some luxury with that or not, with, again, migrants, refugees, et cetera, immigrants, even missionaries, a lot of people, it's not necessarily that luxurious life. So now I've forgotten the question.
Yeah. Just how emotional intelligence can
Yeah.
help us take it to the next level. Yeah.
So we do a training when you come on to Cultures magazine, and in my class as well. We do a training D&I for EQ, EQ for D&I, emotional intelligence for diversity and inclusion. So people are so focused on the justice, and very, very well, so much needed to do that.
Yeah.
That the belonging part doesn't. It seems more like a luxury in some cases, which I think is what people who are in between need. It's that belonging piece in addition to justice. I mean, because when you look at me, yes, social justice is important to me too, right?
Of
I'm
course.
included in that, but often we are the marginalized of the marginalized. So if I'm already part of a marginalized community in the United States, then my identity that I'm trying to find the word. My identity that I identify the most with, I was trying to find a different word, that I identify the most with, is my TCK-ness, right?
Mm.
And so you're basically telling me that's not worth anything because justice is your focus. I'm part
Wow.
of the justice too. So I want to see that happen. I want to work toward that. But we also need the belonging. And so that's where EQ comes into play, right? That emotional intelligence helps us be more innovative, helps us be more creative, helps us be more empathetic, helps us take more risks and be more courageous. So emotional intelligence is so important, and doing that introspection. So what we talked about before, when we stay open-minded all the time, where we really don't sit back and go, oh yeah, I'm the expert. I lived in all these countries. I did all these things. I know how to do that. Well, you might be an expert in those areas.
Right.
And you have the additional, we all as TCKs have the traits that come from that, the adaptability, the flexibility, the
I want to take just a second to extend a very warm welcome to each of you listening all around the world to join us in our Patreon community. That's where we go a little bit deeper in these episodes, where I drop exclusive episodes with extra content from our interviews. If you stay with us for a certain amount of time, you'll get some merch like stickers, totes, and fun stuff like that. And it's just a place for each of us who want to join into this community and go a little bit deeper. So if that's something you're interested in and you'd like to join us there for a deeper conversation, please check us out at patreon.com/a world of difference. Now back to the episode.
The open-mindedness to a certain degree. But when the George Floyd case came about and all the social justice and the social unrest, and even with the Asian hate in the last 18 months, all the things we've had, I had to wait to see the TCK community step up. And I really was like, oh, I'm waiting for y'all, because this is something I saw in my class. It wasn't until my class that I realized that often majority culture TCKs, in whatever culture it is, do not see the social justice needs of their peers, right? Because they see themselves as equal. It's like, oh, this is my friend, we're cool. But there's still injustice in the world. So you have to recognize that your friend is still going through that when they're not with you. And sometimes the friend doesn't realize until they get older and it hits them, because they've been living in this panacea bubble with friends like you and we're all the same. I was in that case, right? And in my case, I always called it my superpower, because I would see racism and it would just roll off my shoulder, right? I could recognize it, but not have it internalized. And over time that changes, right? For some people. So I think as majority TCKs in whatever culture, we have to remember what our minoritized TCKs might be going through and really give that fight for social justice. So that's the EQ in DNI.
So good. I love the nuance of that conversation. Those are kind of conversations that my husband and I have regularly with one of the things we love about the Bay Area is it's full of TCKs of all varieties. Yeah, it's a very diverse place. And like I was at a wedding last Saturday, and one of the friends that I know that was at the wedding, she is ethnically, Korean, but grew up in China and doesn't speak Korean, because during the Korean War, there were a lot of Koreans that moved into a particular part of China, and they have all the Korean food, Korean culture. It's like a little Korea, but she just didn't speak the language. And so, and then now she lives in the States, and people don't often know what to do with that, because it's like, whoa, that's like too complicated. You know what I mean? And so,
that's not even very complicated.
It's not even very complicated. But then there's like, she like might experience Asian hate, every now and then she married like a white guy who's from America and very monocultural. And so, just there's just so much nuance there, and yeah, anyway, it's just fascinating to have those conversations, because like you said, not every TCK has the same experience. And then sometimes majority TCKs who move to their passport country and live there as adults can often also miss things. And so, I love how some of the conversations around George Floyd, which my husband and I went right away for protests for, even though we're like, look like straight up white people. Like, we really care about those issues. Yeah. My husband has a Stop Asian Hate t-shirt he just wore yesterday. Like, we're very vocal about these things. But I think it's because we have used our empathy superpower to learn and listen and just recognize my experience isn't your experience, but I want to be helpful in whatever way I can.
That's such a good point, because I remember, so in Clubhouse, I was on a lot of panels for Asian hate. And I remember one person said, who's going to stand up for us? And I was like, dude, I'll stand up for you all day, every day. And it was interesting, because he was really shocked to hear somebody be so adamant about that. Right. I'm like, I'm in your corner. And for me, how awesome, because it never occurred to me. So you were talking about you're a white person in this space, but that helps elevate the whole conversation. And that's what was happening when I was talking to him as well, because everyone can be an ally, everyone can elevate, and together we all make a difference.
I love it. It's so true. Yeah. And I mean, there is this lie out there that you make a difference by yourself. We are not at all about that on the World of Difference podcast. So, which is why I love getting different perspectives. Like, nobody has a corner on wisdom or how to do something. Like, we can never stop hearing enough perspectives and learning and finding new ways. It helps our imagination and our creativity. And so, we have these stories and history so often where it's this one dude that did this thing, but it's never just the one dude, there's always a group of people, sometimes his mother, his wife, his sister, like people, his teachers, like we're all a product of the village that has helped us be who we are, to give us the ideas, and then even as we're executing the plan, there's always a team, right? And so on the A World of Difference podcast, I think one of our highest values is just getting, as many perspectives as possible, because if we're trying to solve some of the world's biggest problems, we're just not going to know how to do that by ourselves very easily. So
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, research shows it's so you always need that visionary, that first person,
Yeah.
but it's the second person that creates momentum, right? When
Mm,
the second person joins in with the first, then everybody else can say, okay, well, shoot, there's more than one person doing this, right? And then all of a sudden, everyone starts. So the first person needs the most courage to be out there by themselves and not care that anybody else joins. The second person needs the courage to know, okay, I'm going to stand up with you, even if no one else comes. And then all of a sudden, the group starts to come, right? And then here comes all the perspectives. So, yeah, it's never just one person. You always need another person to move a movement forward.
it's so true. It's so true. I know one of the things that I read that you had kind of addressed is fluid cultural identities, which you talked a little bit about here. But I'd love to deal a little bit more with some of the media part of your work, and through media and marketing, sometimes there's this emphasis on what you've talked about as hidden as well as visual diversity.
Yeah.
Explain more about what you mean by that.
So, of course, visual diversity is what phenotypically someone looks at you and they make an assumption on who you are and where you come from, right? So even if someone, and especially with me, with my accent, right? My
Yeah.
accent today, because when I'm in someplace else, my accent will be different, right?
Yeah.
So they look at you and they go, oh, you're African American. And they make all these assumptions before moving forward. And then in my case, it usually ends up being cognitive dissonance because after they speak with me for a few minutes or they get to know me, now they're confused. It's like, well, you're just weird. You're not, because they already have all these assumptions in their head, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't look like those assumptions. So now the definition is weird.
Yeah.
You're strange. I just thought you were different, right? Yeah, I'll take different. I'll take weird or strange too, but whatever.
Yeah. Right.
And so cultural fluidity is being able to go, it's a spectrum, just like anything else, being able to go back and forth in different cultures very easily. It's, as you said, it's part of our DNA. It's just something that we do, right? So the visual diversity is what we see. The hidden diversity is who we are beneath the surface that may not be seen and adds to the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so being a TCK is part of that hidden diversity.
It's awesome. That's so well explained. Yeah, I'm sure like in your classes that you teach, you kind of deal with some of the nuance of that. But what are just some of the key parts of your, because I know you have a university curriculum for global culture identity. What are some of the key parts that really have resonated with you or your students?
Well, like I said, it's hard for some of them to,
Yeah.
to really absorb it. So I typically have 4 types of students every semester. So we get the majority culture US male, and then the majority culture US female. So read white person,
Yeah.
which actually I'm not sure that counts anymore based on the latest census, right?
That's true. The younger generation. Yeah.
Yep. So and then I usually have some TCKs in class. When I first started the class 8 years ago, we had about 20% TCKs. I remember I was so excited that I had that many. And over the years, I typically on average have about 80% TCKs in my class.
Wow.
Most of them don't know their TCKs until they get into the class. So of course, that's why the class interested them, because the topic just sounds interesting, right?
Yeah.
And they get in there and they're like, oh my gosh. And so many of them find out they're TCKs in that class. So I have the 2 majority cultures, and then I have a TCK segment, and then we have a disadvantaged population or a minoritized population from the US. Okay, these are usually the 4 segments of people that I have. Of those 4 segments, tell me who you think. Okay, so I'll tell you more of the concepts, which was part of your question. The concepts really are about what is global culture, what is global culture identity, and then we break down the definitions of TCK, ATCK, TCA, cross-cultural, all the acronyms start to spin in your head when this is not part of who you are. We talk about educational TCKs, we talk about the dimensions, military brats, missionary kids, the nuances of each type of TCK and how that makes them different and how you understand each of them. Those are all parts of the dimensions. And then we talk about ethnic and racial diversity as part of that as well. Okay. So that being said, and thinking of it from a global lens and a cross-cultural lens, not monoculturally, but through the lens of these four populations, majority male, majority female, TCK, or US minoritized, right? Person of color. So now, which one do you think would understand those concepts of the class the best?
I assume the TCK, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. And then who do you think would be second best?
The last one.
The minoritized.
Yeah.
You are the first person to get that.
Oh, yay!
Now I'm going to ask
for
you
me.
a question. Why do you think the minoritized would be the last to understand? Or did you say, wait, I said the next one.
Yeah.
Okay. I did it backwards. Sorry.
Okay, so I got it
wrong. I'm sorry. After
That's
I celebrated.
okay. You know what? It was a good moment.
So let me tell you why. And this is why it kind of answers your questions, because again, it goes back to how we think and we see the world through our lens, right? So that's why I say even with TCKs, we think we're so multicultural, and we are.
Yeah.
That doesn't make us the expert in everything, right? So the person who typically understands the concepts the best is the white male who comes into my class.
Wow.
I know, right? And really, it's because most of them come in like, I have no clue what this is. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They just do the work. And they are floundering through the whole way, but they're so open.
Because they know they don't know.
They don't know. So they're so open that everything soaks in, even though they think that it's not soaking in. You have to constantly go, no, you got it, right? Versus the worst one is typically the minoritized US population. Again, back to what we talked about, because in the US, we talk about race as being multicultural. And in this class, culture is the basis. It's the foundation for global culture, right?
Yeah.
And so you've been taught this your whole life, and you've been in an oppressed situation your whole life. Now here comes someone trying to teach you something different, trying to open your eyes to a different way of being, that your oppression isn't everything of who you are. And so it's difficult for them to open up and understand that there's people in the world who think this way, right?
Yeah.
So that's why typically, and especially, if I get ethnic studies students, man, those, woo! And I tell them ahead of time, you have a minor or major in ethnic studies, or you've taken some ethnic studies classes, don't think that you're going to skate through this class, because this is completely different.
Yeah.
Now, I do love that they've taken those classes, because like I said, for TCKs, I think that TCKs need that nuance. We think because we embrace everyone and all our friends are multicultural and we grew up this way, life is great. But we have to remember there is oppression and there's not social justice for everyone. So we have to be champions, like you and your husband are champions for those things, and work to understand those things so that your friend that you love, that you really get them. I can't tell you how many of my friends that I'm like, okay, I'm just going to let it go because I know they mean well. I know they love me, but you're completely clueless and you just don't get it right now.
Yeah.
Right. And the ones who, when someone gives you the gift of taking the time and making the effort to educate you on something that you don't know, especially in that social justice or in that racial lens, the best gift you could give back is to listen. And it's a gift to yourself as well, because so many people, they immediately jump to defense. I'm not like that. I didn't do that. Or immediately jump to apology. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. But don't jump so fast. I know it's painful, but the pain is in the learning, and the learning is in the quiet moment, right? That someone gave you the gift You let it hit and it stung. Oh gosh, that stung. That didn't feel so great. Did I do that? But when you let it just soak in over time, it'll sting for a few times, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully you learn the lesson for the next time, but you might still do it and it'll sting again. But the more you do that, the more you put your foot out there, the easier it becomes and the more you will grow, right? So that's the difference. That's why this population does best in my class. This population is typically does not do the best in my class. It's all preconceived notions. And that's what this is about. That's what the whole hidden diversity is about. We need to open our minds. Hey, I put myself in there too. I have to remember every day to not make judgments, to really be open to who is this person before I go to the next level with them. So,
So good. That right there may be the best nugget of all, you know, because it's just hard. It's our human
yeah,
nature is we want to put people, we don't like cognitive dissonance. It's very miserable for our brains and bodies and souls to have. We don't like to stay there very long, and then we choose one side or the other. We just go with it. But like you said, it's those little painful moments that just sit with it for a little bit. Let it be your teacher. Grow from it. It's not easy, but stretch yourself a little bit. We all need to do that more and more to be connected with people in ways, you know, it's the whole treat each other like you want to be treated. You know, we don't, nobody wants to be seen as some cookie cutter anything. You know, all of us, whether TCKs or not, we're all unique and we deserve to be known.
right, exactly. 1,000%. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. That's the part for me where it gets tiring, that to show people that this is worthy as well. It's not a fluff type of thing of all these um, rich people with luxurious lives that got to float around the world, right? There's a lot of nuance to this type of lifestyle as well. And the thing I want to say with this too is to give yourself grace. Give
Mm,
yourself grace to make the mistakes, you know, to live in the pain, because that'll make it palatable. When you know that you mean well and you know you're actually doing the work, because it's one thing to mean well, it's another thing to think you're doing some work and you're not.
yeah,
Um, but when you're really working, then give yourself grace. You'll make mistakes. It's just gonna happen.
it
It's
is.
a good.
We all do. That's good.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
Well, we're in this change maker series, so clearly you are making some incredible changes. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank
And
you.
we'll definitely point people here at the end to where to find you. But one question I want you to answer that I'm asking everybody in our series is who's a change maker in your life that you admire? Maybe just somebody that you've never met, that you've read their writings, or, you know, an actor or a musician or somebody that's alive or not alive. And you know, who has invested in you and made you inspired to want to make changes?
So definitely my parents, my mom and my dad. So I shared with you, my dad died of COVID. He's Costa
Yeah.
Rican. My mom is Trinidadian. They both have some cultural dimensionality to them, and and just by being who they were and coming to the U.S. and thinking differently, even though they weren't necessarily like you are with your kids, which I just assume it sounds like you're very vocal and open about making sure they have these experiences. My parents didn't do that, but they did it subtly. So it was the
Yeah.
same. It was like it was
Mm-hmm.
constant, right? And so that was very key to who I am. Um, and my parents have been divorced since I was two. So it's interesting that both of them influenced me in that way. And my father, in death, actually, and as he fought cancer, he really inspired me. And I mentioned to you that the next year of cultures is a year of Latin America, and that's partly in tribute to him. We did a time for change issue that celebrated COVID around the world, well, not celebrated, but featured COVID around the world and social justice with George Floyd and Blackness around the world. So it started with
Mm.
that issue. I've been working hard on relearning Spanish and being fluent by the end of the year as part of that tribute. And then the last part of the tribute is the year of Latin America and going through all of the cross culturalness of this part of the world. But those are my inspirations. But let me tell you who has inspired me recently. Um, Naomi Osaka
Yes.
and Simone Biles, right?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So Simone Biles is adopted, which I don't know much about. I don't have much research on this, but there's so many adoptees monocultural adoptees that really resonate with the TCK story. And I do have one of our experts, one of our doctors on the cultures team, was head executive director of a adoptive agency in or not for profit in Hawaii. And she talks frequently. And she has 4 TCK kids, and she's a CCK herself, and her husband's a TCK. They're all also multi-ethnic, multiracial. So she talks about the connection between adoptees and TCKs. So I don't know as much about it, but Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, I really feel that underneath that is part of what gives them their superpowers, right?
Mm,
I love that they both have spoken out very vocally about mental health
yep.
and making it more mainstream. I love, and that's part of this generation. You know, we talk about, every generation talks badly about the ones coming up, right? But there's
Yeah.
always good about each generation. Each
Yeah.
generation is based on what life is like now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that this generation is so concerned about our health because, you know, I think technology, as much as I love it, it's overwhelming us, and
Yeah.
it's going from our brains to our bodies, and we're being overwhelmed. And I love that this generation is feeling that in some way, and they're making a difference. So those two being so vocal in their highly publicized positions and the stress that they're under, and then taking this, talk about putting your foot in it, taking the stress of what people have to say when they make a huge courageous leap to not finish a tournament or to
Yep.
pull out of the Olympics, and then to say why you did it. Oh, that's next level to me.
It is next
That's
level.
yes, yes,
Yes,
very
I
inspirational.
agree. Those two women have inspired me too, and I've had a lot of conversations with people. I know some pretty high level athletes that have struggled in some of those ways, and just it's freeing. It frees everyone. But I mean, you don't have to be an athlete to be inspired by that. Certainly, the pressure is quite unique to be an Olympian, but at the same time, we can all be inspired to just be ourselves. And I do love that about this generation. I'm raising them, they're teaching me. It's hard on them, it's hard on all of us to walk through this, crazy pandemic with all the other crises thrown in. But they're helping us. I think, isn't it good that in a time when we're trying to dig more deeply into a racial reconciliation, not just here in the US, but in a lot of countries, when we're trying to deal with health of our bodies in a pandemic, that they're also not letting us off the hook around mental health, because all of it's connected. Our minds and our bodies and our brains, they're all connected. And so I love that about this generation. They're ambitious, they're helping us. So it's good. And you're
Preach.
teaching them. So thanks for teaching them.
Let me tell you, it's not always easy.
No, it is not easy to raise them either. Yeah.
Man, they challenge you for real. I mean, that's a superpower of this generation too. I think
Mm.
they really Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They challenge you, and that's different than previous years. I think previous decades. So, yeah.
It's good. It's good. Yes. I look forward to more a world of difference, young ones growing up and continuing to teach us and work alongside us. It's great. Well, tell everybody where they can find you and your magazine, all the work that you do.
Yes. So you can find us at culturesmag.com, and cultures is plural and it's missing an E. The missing E stands for the hidden diversity of our population. So CULTURS mag.com. And when you go there, sign up, you'll get a free edition of the magazine. You'll join our community. We have media, products, and experiences that celebrate 21st century cultural diversity. So you'll find more people who are like you, which, by the way, I want to put a shout out to all of your people. Definitely, there's a form if you go to About Us under the Work With Us page. If you want to be featured, if you want us to tell your story, I would love to tell the stories of your people. Actually, I'd love to tell your family stories too.
Aw, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it all, as you can see, it all fascinates me. I love it all. We love to publicize it. We love to show other TCKs and other cross-cultural people that they're not alone, right? It's all about a sense of belonging, cultivating a sense of belonging, having that human connection, and knowing that you don't have to do this alone. So thank you for this. And I
Ah,
really appreciate our time.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. And I hope everybody listening goes to that page. If you are a TCK or you know a TCK or anybody you think should be featured there, please do that. We want to hear more stories. That sounds like fun. Well,
Yeah,
thank
for
you.
sure.
And thank you for the work that you do. I hope it just continues to flourish and bless people everywhere.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this.
Me too. Bye, Donnie.
Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with all the cultural nuance around what it means to be Doni Aldine and the work that she does. And as we understand cultures and peoples around the world and the mixtures and the uniqueness of all of it, it's such a beautiful diversity. And it really makes a difference in our lives when we understand the many dimensions that are within so many humans on this planet that make it such a beautiful place to be and live and work and be making a difference together. In this change series that we're in, we're going to have some pretty exciting guests coming up. I met a couple of different podcast hosts at PodFest in Orlando when I was there recently. And so we're going to have a few of them on this show. We're going to have Dr. Karen Reeder of Westmont College here in Santa Barbara, California, going to be talking about her new book around the Samaritan woman. We're going to have Allison McKinney Tim, who's the executive director of Justice Revival, is going to be on in March talking about women's history and passing the ERA and all the great work that she's doing. We're going to have Kristen McAllister come in and talk to us about what it means to be a good podcast guest. So if you've ever wanted to be a guest on a podcast, she has a business around helping people learn that, and she's an incredible person. We're going to have Dr. Nijay Gupta talk about his book that's being released called Tell Her Story. It's about women, how they ministered in the early church. I've had an early copy of the book and have read it. It's outstanding. So I look forward to having him on as his book is releasing. And we're going to also have Melissa Hughes. Many of you may follow her on TikTok or have seen her on the Kelly Clarkson Show. I met her at podcast, and she's going to talk about social media and the work that she does around positive aspects of social media and how to grow your business on social media, and also her experience of living in Wales as a church planter and working through some health issues, and just how that experience was a lot of change. And so in this change series, we're going to be talking about all sorts of changes, how to change our minds, how to deal with wanted and unwanted change, expected and unexpected change, and how to have some handles to walk through change from people who have walked through it themselves. And I really am excited about the guests we're going to be having on the show. Oh, also, we're going to have Angela Prophet, who I met, went to her session at PodFest, and she's the founder and CEO of GSD and also a productivity expert. So if you're dealing with a lot of change and you're needing to be productive in the midst of it all, she's certainly going to be helpful as somebody who travels the world and has fun, interactive sessions with people on how to be more productive, and has built a great business all on her own, and how some COVID pandemic issues around her own life caused her own body to change in certain ways, and how she overcame that herself personally, and the changes she was able to see through implementing exercise. And I'm definitely expecting her to talk about her walking desk and how she does exercise while she works, and how that's helped her be healthier and get in her steps every day as she's a productive and very busy, successful woman herself. Well, anyway, lots of guests coming up. I'm excited about this change series, and I would love to have any of you, if this show has impacted you or if any of our shows have impacted you, to reach out. You can always find me on Twitter at LoriADBR. I'm also, all my information is in the show notes. So if you want to interact around this podcast or any of the others, I'd love to know how it's landing with you and how it's sitting with you. If anything in this podcast episode changed your mind, I definitely would love to hear about that in this change series. That's one of the things we're unpacking a bit. But also, if there's anybody in your life that you felt like this episode would really be helpful to them, I would love to know if you've shared it with them. And if someone has shared it with you, let us know. Shout them out too. It also just really means a great deal to me and all of us here at the show when you share any of these episodes, because it really is a way that we can make a difference by saying, hey, let's talk about this episode. It brought up some things for me. It helped me see things in a new way and a new perspective. And we love to start deep discussions out there. And we'd love to hear about how that's going for you. So always reach out to me on Twitter at LoriADBR. Love to have a conversation with you there. And in the meantime, thank you for all that you're doing all around the world, for being the beautiful, different people that you are, and for making a difference wherever you are. We'll talk again next week. Bye, everyone. As we're finishing this episode, if you're thinking, I really wish I could learn more or go a little bit deeper. Well, that's what our Difference Maker community is for. I would love to welcome you in to join the rest of us there. Once again, it's only $5 a month to join, the price of a latte at your local coffee shop. You can join at our Changers tier. Difference Makers is a community that really means so much to me. It's very special because each time I have a guest on the show, I record something outside of what we give to just the regular podcast audience, where we go a little bit deeper. And then I post those video episodes in this community and we can discuss them. But also at the very beginning tier, which is our Changers tier of this community, you'll get exclusive voting power and help pick podcast topics that give us, more of what we want from your perspective. You'll have access to exclusive 30 plus mini-sodes that aren't out there for the general public. And you'll get every month an exclusive monthly bonus mini-sode. At our Groundbreakers level, which is $10 a month, you can join and get all of that, but also priority access to submit questions to the podcast. And you'll get an additional 2 exclusive monthly bonus mini-sodes. And at our Trailblazers tier, which is $15 a month, the price of 3 lattes a month, you can get all of that, plus also 3 exclusive monthly bonus minisodes, and a patron shout out. So I would love for you to join us at any of those tiers. It'll help you come into this community, be in the midst of all of us, other difference makers, and we'd love to hear your perspective. I certainly would. It's a place to engage more with me and the audience around what you like, what you're resonating with, and once again, go deeper with each of our guests. So please join us in this membership community. I would love to hear your perspective and love to share this extra content with you. So show up at patreon.com/a world of difference.